Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies. I am very happy and I'm honored to have the possibility to open this academic conference, the purpose of which is to assess the results of the criminal policy since the entry into force of the new criminal code. In 2012, the National Assembly adopted Hungary's fourth criminal code in its history. The first one, as everybody knows, Act number 5 of 1878, known as the Csemegi Codex in Hungarian circles, had become the oldest among all the criminal codes of Hungary. Then, as its special part was in force until as late as 1962. So from 1878, the special part of the first criminal code was in force until 1962, quite a long time. The subsequent Act, number 5 of 1961, didn't survive adolescence, as it was only in force until 1979, and was replaced by Act number 4 of 1978, which lived long enough to reach a symbolic 33 years of age. Although not a cardinal act, the Criminal Code is one of the most important legal norms for both its weight and significance. Its enactment a decade ago was an integral part of the legislative process, which, following the adoption of the fundamental law, aimed to revise the principal elements of the national legal system through cardinal and code-like laws. The Criminal Code, which entered into force on the 1st of July 2013, was therefore a milestone in the implementation of the National Cooperation Programme and in the renewal of the Hungarian legal system. In 2010, the national government set as its fundamental goal the building of a strong Hungary based on our Christian national traditions, Christian heritage, resilient to the global challenges of our time, socially and economically robust and modernized, providing a secure future for all of its citizens. In 2010, however, the incoming government also had to face an alarming deterioration of public security in our country. Consequently, the conservative government made it a priority to restore order in the country and improve the citizens' sense of security. One important means to achieve this aim was to enact strict laws that guarantee protection for all law-abiding citizens while imposing effective and dissuasive punishment for offenders. Yet, the new criminal code was justified not only by the deplorable state of public security in Hungary, but also by the rapidly changing socio-economic environment and the need to comply with international and EU legal obligations. The legislator couldn't but take into account the new conditions. Significantly, Act 4 of 1978, the old criminal code, had been amended more than 100 times, reflecting the different, often diverging criminal policy orientations of successive governments after the political changes in 1989. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the Programme for National Cooperation states, and I'm quoting, that the stringency of the law, the increased severity of punishment, the repeated use of life imprisonment, the protection of victims will deter the perpetrators of crimes and make it clear to all members of society that Hungary is not a paradise for criminals. A strong Hungary can only be born if laws made in the Országház, so in the national parliament, can guarantee the safety of law-abiding people. End of quotation. So the most important expectation towards the new criminal code was therefore the strictness. However, this does not necessarily mean an increase in the penalties prescribed, but rather a more pronounced emphasis on a proportional approach, like a closer link between the seriousness of the crime committed and the harshness of the punishment foreseen. The legislator's ultimate aim was to produce a uniform, modern, consistent and effective code, thus restoring the role of criminal law as the ultima ratio, a keystone of the law. In this context, ladies and gentlemen, let me highlight just one of the provisions of this criminal code for illustrative purposes only. Firstly, the rules on the statute of limitations have been aggravated. Under the new provisions, prosecution is barred upon the lapse of time equal to the maximum penalty prescribed, but after not less than 5 years. No statute of limitations applies to the crimes which carry a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Secondly, the new criminal code also sets more stringent general limits for sentences. Thirdly, in an effort to contrast some new forms of criminality, the legislator has introduced new offenses such as sexual exploitation, poaching game, and economic fraud. Fourthly, the new code has lowered the age of criminal responsibility for certain offenses such as homicide, severe bodily injury causing danger to life or death, robbery, plundering, from 14 to 12 years, making criminal responsibility in these cases subject to a test of discernment. As fifth, in view of the fact that the fundamental law elevated self-defense to a fundamental constitutional right, the code broadened the criteria of justifiable defense, comprising situations where a person unlawfully attacked may assume that the attack is posing an imminent danger to his life. In such cases, the circumstances of the unlawful attack create the possibility of exceeding the reasonable force of self-defense. Sixth, the new criminal code puts a greater emphasis on the protection of vulnerable groups. The age of the victim constitutes a qualifying circumstance in the case of, for example, kidnapping, trafficking in human beings, and sexual offenses committed against a person younger than 14 or 18 years. The same applies to homicide, battery, or plundering if committed against someone whose ability to defend himself is limited due to his age or disability. And finally, as an example, the code has introduced new penalties and enshrined in law the so-called 3 strikes and the median rule. Dear guests, following the entry into force of the criminal code in 2013, several amendments have been made to date to deal more effectively and vigorously with new forms of offenses and new trends in crime. In this context, the rule has been laid down that those who have committed serious offenses against children should no longer be allowed to be employed in the fields of education, childcare, and medical treatment of children. Similarly, in order to address the emergency caused by illegal migration, substantive criminal provisions have been adopted, thus providing the courts with new means of bringing illegal border crossers to justice. One example is the definition of the breach of a border barrier as a sui generis offense and the introduction of stricter penalties for illegal immigrant smuggling. The Ministry of Justice declared 2020 the Year of Victim Assistance, which goes on still today, introducing reforms to fundamentally re-regulate the offenses of exploitative behaviors like trafficking in human beings, forced labor, and child prostitution, partly in response to signals from the legal practice. The rules governing release on parole were also reformed in the course of the revision with the establishment of a system that takes more account of the personality of the offender and the victim and the seriousness of the offense. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced that the creation of the new code was based on the right approach, given the nature of criminal law as a conservative branch of the legal system, insofar as the codification had not been driven by the ambition to innovate at all costs, but rather by the intention to make criminal code more coherent, balanced, and easier to apply. In fact, this code has proved a well-prepared piece of legislation that builds on our traditions in criminal law, but at the same time makes the necessary updates simpler, clearer, and reflects the government's criminal policy in a clear-cut manner. Károly Csemegi's unique and unrepeatable code set a challengingly high standard, which will remain inescapable for the future generations of Hungarian criminal lawyers and legislators. In view of today's rapidly changing world, I hope that the new code will also be able to serve our criminal justice system in a user-friendly manner, finding acceptance and even appreciation among the legal practitioners in accordance with its stated objective for a considerable period of time. I have no intention, dear ladies and gentlemen, of commenting on these topics any further, as they are the actual topics and theme of our conference. So I just would like to wish you all a fruitful conference and successful, inspiring discussions for the most of the time of this day. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye.